I'm going to give you advice on what I've seen in the different licenses over the industry of what helps businesses succeed. And based on the experiences that I've had from all the clients and from all the different types of business ventures that we've done, we're going to apply that to the cannabis industry. So before we begin, I want to know if anybody can raise their hand if they're married. Let me keep them up. Don't be scared. It's okay. I'm not going to. All right, that's a good amount of people. Now, how many of you that are married would have married that person on the first date before you knew anything about them? Okay, these are the people that might get away with not having to do due diligence. Everybody else needs to pay attention. This is for you. For those of you who would marry your spouse, okay, on the first date, knowing this, how many of you have a home? Raise your hand just from that group. How many of you would have bought your home if you didn't do an inspection? This is why even you guys need to know what due diligence is, learn from the experience of people that have failed at it miserably, and learn how to do it better. So this is what we're going to do today. Due diligence is really a fancy word of how you do your homework on the transaction or how you do your homework on something. It's giving you the information, whether you're dating somebody, about to buy a house, you want to know what you're getting into. And so this is going to be the first part of the presentation. We're going to talk about due diligence, how it comes up, what's the context of it, how it applies to cannabis. And then we're going to talk about how to do business better in cannabis. It's a changing industry, and that's what we're going to get into. Tell me what you think is a normal step in due diligence. What do you think you need to do? Anything? Research. Okay. Where do you think it comes up in cannabis? Do you think it comes up at all? Or? Should, right? How many of you in here own a business? Raise your hand. Did any of you do due diligence before buying the business? Yeah. And that helps you determine whether or not you want to go forward with something. So due diligence in the context of what we're discussing now comes up in a transaction. A transaction is usually when you're buying or selling something. And we're going to talk about what types of transactions those are. In the world that we live in, there's a document that dictates when everything is supposed to happen. That's called usually a purchase agreement. If any of you have ever bought your businesses or bought real estate or sold anything without real estate, that's like malpractice 101. Everything should always be in writing. It's nice if you don't have to look at what's in writing, because then you're dealing with somebody who's a decent human being on the other side, and you're working forward and working through things. But the fact of the matter is if you disagree about something, because there's at least two sides to every story, right? Sometimes you're going to do something, you think that this is what your takeaway is from it, and the other person is on a completely different planet. So the reason why it's very important to get everything in writing is that there's no ambiguity. It says that we're buying this property for this exact dollar amount. This is how I am paying you. This is what we're going to be doing. These are details you don't want to, screw up, because it costs money. And in a business, you're in it to make money. So due diligence is the phase in the transaction that allows you to do your homework on the property. Depending on what you're buying or selling, the length of time for that due diligence changes. If you're trying to open up a cannabis dispensary, right? But that's part of a bigger development that you're putting up. You're trying to buy a plaza and you're going to make that one of the types of businesses. Do you want the same time that you need to open up that cannabis business to be your due diligence to see if you can even build on that property? They're not the same. These are considerations that you have to think about, because as a business owner, your goal here is to open your doors as soon as you possibly can. And if you don't take into these considerations, because you're going to be the one that has to coordinate with everybody else what you need to do, you're putting yourself to a disadvantage. So don't just worry about taking one step. Worry about how to get to the end result, because there are a lot of different paths and how to get there. The reason why it's important is because you want to decide before you marry that person or before you buy something if you really want it, if it's what you thought it is. On the outside, that business or that product or this line that you're going to buy may look really great, but maybe when you get down to the numbers or get down to the nitty-gritty after review everything, this is not what you thought it would be, and you want to be able to back out before you have to end up paying for everything. That's why it's very significant. If you ever buy something as is, it should only be maybe once. I'm talking about real estate and business, not if you find a cute piece of clothing or if a guy finds like something they can trade. But if you're buying real estate or anything related to cannabis and you buy it as is, you're doing yourself a disservice, and I highly suggest that you're making a mistake. You should never buy something as is without doing your homework on it. So now this is my bubble, right? It comes down to just three things: a real estate acquisition, an asset acquisition, and an entity interest acquisition. These are fancy words to basically get you what you want at the end of the day. So if you're buying how many of you own the real estate where your business is located? Okay. So for these lovely people over here, they had a real estate acquisition. And then did you guys buy the company? Was it already existing from somebody, or did you start from scratch? You started from scratch. So they only fell into the real estate acquisition. If they were going to buy a business and there was already an existing business there, they would have, and they wanted to buy that, they would have two ways of doing that transaction. The reason why this even matters, why I'm even boring you guys about this if that's the case, is because how to get to the finish line of these is drastically different. And what your liability and exposure in each one of these is significantly different. And there's a presumption, especially in cannabis, because it's not legal under the federal law yet. And because it's such a sophisticated industry that's evolving, the more you know as business owners, the better you will be at business. If you do the asset sale, an asset sale is me saying, I want to buy bits and pieces of Cobo Hall. I want to buy the tables. I want to buy only the good stuff. I don't want any of the bad stuff. You're literally able to pick and choose what you want. And as you guys know, an asset on your books is always something positive. What you don't want is the liabilities. So that's what you're not buying. You're not taking their debt. You're not taking the people that haven't paid them. You're not taking some furniture that you think is going to cost more to restore. So in a cannabis business, the asset is always the license. You can buy just that license and not have to get anything else. We're going to talk a little bit more about this because many municipalities, which are the ones that issue the licenses, the approval for the license locally, they have strings on what you could do with that asset that you have or the one that you want to buy. One of the biggest things that we see is there's usually a section in the ordinance that we check for, which tells you, are you allowed to transfer that asset or not? If you're not allowed to transfer the asset, that changes your evaluation of your business. And if our job is to always try to find a way to do that. So if you're not able to buy that asset, to buy that license, to put it in your name, right? Then you have to buy that other person's company that they own that license in. You don't know them. You have not enough time to do due diligence on them, and you don't want to do due diligence on them. You don't know if they've been paying their taxes. You don't know if their product or anything that they're selling has been contaminated. You don't know if they have insurance. You don't know nothing about them. And my job is to scare you about them, because that's what it's like when people just buy things without doing their due diligence. You're literally committing to something you don't even know what it is. Just because people see is this is an asset, it's gold, it's supply and demand. They have the dispensary license. They have one of only 3. That's it, we have to get that. No, there's not just one way to get that. The goal of this is not, at the end of the day, if you have to buy it from somebody, you can, but you have to take the right process and procedures to do your due diligence to know what you're getting yourself into. If they have liabilities that exceed what you think it's worth or what you can afford to put into that business, then that's not the right venture for you. If they owe a certain amount of debt, and for you that's something you can put right under the rug and you don't mind that, that's no problem. But let's make sure when we do the transaction, if they're telling us this is all that they owe and we're stepping into their shoes for the company, the owners are going to be there after the fact. even if we buy their company. So we can go after them. And these are all very important things that are all outlined in the purchase agreement, which basically puts your terms into effect. It's binding. How many of you ever heard of the term letter of intent? Okay. How many of you feel like if you have a letter of intent, you have something enforceable? Good, you guys all pass. No one here will ever sign a letter of intent. People argue about this all day long. Attorneys argue about this all day long. There's so much case law on there of whether or not a letter of intent is binding. And for those who don't know, it's just a term sheet that says what the purchaser and seller are agreeing to for the transaction, whether it is a real estate or a business or anything like that. What I want to tell you is that if you guys already agreed on the basic terms, don't even entertain the LOI, just jump into the purchase agreement. Do you really want to go to court, sit there and argue about who's right and who's wrong while time is money and you've wasted it just trying to figure out if somebody's going to do the deal with you or not? Jump into the purchase agreement. I'm not here to give you legal advice on if your LOI is enforceable or not. I'm telling you that it's a gray area. Avoid it as much as you possibly can. That's my takeaway on that. So each one of these transactions, as we were talking about, if we end up wanting to buy Cobo Hall, we would literally take the owner, whatever company it is, I'm assuming, and we would buy either the shares, and this is something they don't really teach you guys, and it gets very confusing, and I'm going to make it very simple for you right now. A corporation is typically when you have an Inc., right, at the end of your business name. It's like an INC or a co. An LLC, which you guys see more often right now, is a limited liability company. I think about it like I think about the iPhone, right? These companies all came out in different periods of time, like a partnership. How many of you remember partnerships? Right? When those came out, LLCs didn't exist. So you have like partnerships, and then you have corporations, and then you have LLCs. Unless you're a tax advisor, and I'm a lawyer, I'm not good at math, so I'm not giving you any advice about that. But unless your tax advisor tells you to form otherwise, you want to go with the newest version. You want the new iPhone. If you're going to go in and you're going to buy a phone, you want the most recent version. You don't want the oldest version. So make sure that the person that you're using to form your corporation or your tax advisor is up to date on these things, because the most recently new corporation is the one that affords the owners the most protection. Like limited liability company literally stands for limiting your liability as an owner. And they can be taxed several different ways. Again, this is all for your tax advisor to know. But I felt it was very important to mention this because 2 weeks ago, I asked a CPA to get me an EIN number, which is your tax ID number, like your social security number for your business, for our client. This CPA is very, very, very well known. And I told them, this is the name of the owner, and here are the articles. The articles is what's registered with the state of Michigan. I want you all to never make this mistake. You do know, and if you don't know, now you know. The person listed on the articles of organization with the state of Michigan, that's public information, is not necessarily the owner of the company. Okay, that's just the person that you sue. That's just the person that you give the paperwork to. That's just a contact person for the company. And this CPA, even when I gave him the license of the other person, went and filed that the person on the articles, who was the lawyer for the company, which was me, is the sole owner of this new LLC that we formed. So just letting you guys know that there's a difference. The contact person is not the owner. If your name is on the articles, that does not mean that you actually have ownership in the company. And you need to know that. So these are the 3 basic types of transactions. Equity just means, is the word for ownership interest. If it's an LLC, you're buying what's called membership interest. If it's an Inc., you're buying shares in a corporation. They're 2 different transactions. If you have an LLC and you're selling your shares and they give you a shareholder, a stock sale, you're talking apples and oranges. Yes, they're both fruit, but you're not talking about the same thing. All right, so this is the life of a transaction. Now that you guys know what due diligence is, now that you know don't sign an LOI and think that it's binding necessarily, wait till you get to a purchase agreement. you can literally take this, if you take a picture of it, and any transaction that you enter into for the rest of your life, if they don't have these basic bullet points, that transaction, you're not protected in many regards. It's missing a lot. If you think one of these things is not important, let me know at the end of this. And if you're comfortable not having the agreement that's memorializing your purchase, right? Or your sale of something, and it's missing these terms, then it's not clear. And when it's not clear, you either go to court or you have to figure it out with the other person. And who wants that advantage, right? You want everything to be smooth sailing. So we talked about offer. What's the deal here? Okay, then you have acceptance. I'm okay with the deal. The purchase agreement memorializes. It's probably one of my favorite words because it means you're taking something and putting it in writing. If it's not in writing, it's not memorialized. Doesn't matter what you guys think. What are the basic terms? I've actually looked at purchase agreements. I probably look at 5, 6 a day, and I've actually seen some not have the purchase price. You need to know for what you're getting for whether you're buying or selling. It's very important that it's identified in there. How is it paid? We'll talk about this a little bit later, but cannabis is now a cash business, right? Most of you can attest to that. You're not able to get financing from the banks like you would if you were to explore any of your other passions or businesses that you would want to open. So now you see a lot more of what's called seller financing, which is, okay, you want to buy my building, you got to pay me on a land contract, or I'll let you take title, but I'm going to put a mortgage on the property. People are now taking the roles of banks. So that's another hat that you have to wear as a business owner if you want to be in this industry. Every other industry, you don't have to also wear this hat. But here, if you don't have the cash to play, and even if you do have the cash, if you're given the opportunity to not have to cash somebody out for a business that you want or real estate that you want, and you can use that money for other projects because timing is everything in this industry, then you want to see, is that an option? Who cares if you have $1 million to buy this business? If they're willing to finance it for you and you can make monthly payments and they're going to be your bank, why wouldn't you? So ask. It's an option. What's the worst they're going to do? Say no? Now, if they do say yes, or if you're the one it changes roles. If you guys are the seller, I want you to get cashed out. Because you guys want to get your money and not have to worry about if this person is going to continue making payments. If they run my business into the ground, am I going to be able to step back in and take over? I was going to retire and go to Barbados and be a bartender. Now I have to come back and deal with the mess that they left me. These are all things that, depending on which side of the transaction that you are, I'm giving you considerations that you should think of. If you're a buyer, you want to see, how long you can go without having to cash them out. If you're a seller, you want to get your money as soon as possible. Another advantage that I've seen that I always try to negotiate is if the purchase price is very high, like say they want $1.7 million for the land and for the business, I'm willing to cash you out. I need a discount on that. That's another strategy that you can implement in is because the market does not provide for financing, use that tool to your advantage. This is how you're going to be a more successful business owner, and this is how you're going to lead your business into the future, is when you start thinking of different considerations before you make your next move. So that's why it's important on how it's paid and then when it's paid. You're a bank now if you're financing this deal. Are you charging late fees? Are you charging interest? How are you getting your money? If you don't get your money, what are you doing to secure that? Are you going to put a lien on the license? Are you going to put a lien on the inventory? Are you going to put a lien on the equipment so that they can't do business if they end up, foreclosing and not making payments? You go and you take everything. If it's something where, you are just cashing out on one, I see this happen all the time and it really bothers me. If you're the owner of the real estate and you're the owner of the business and you're selling both, and you guys know, and if you don't know, you have to make sure of this, you have to allocate the purchase price to the real estate differently than you are the business. And if you're the buyer, this is significantly important for you because you pay property taxes based on what you're building the last sale price is. So if they think that their building is now worth $1 million more because it has this license, don't pay that $1 million more on the real estate, which may only be worth $400,000, and make it $1.4 million. Allocate that money, and again, always talk to your tax advisor about these things, but make sure you allocate the money properly, because that may just need to be put on the business. Can you imagine if you go and you close on this and now you're having to pay taxes on the building that is not worth more than $400,000, and then you're paying taxes on it being estimated at $1.4 million? These are all considerations that you need to think of in how you structure the transaction. To who it's paid. You're almost always, I never let my client buy anything in their name. And if I do, there has to be a very, very specific reason that we've thought about and decided this is the best course of action. Almost always, we form a new company. We want a new clean slate so that your exposure to liability is limited in that regard to that specific transaction. So if you have multiple stores, multiple locations, multiple buildings, they should all, be separately owned, or you should consult your attorney on how to properly structure that. So what happens here is that if you guys are owners in a company and your name, for example, is not on the real estate, your name is only on the business, you have to make sure that when it's time to close, the right people are getting paid. And that has to be done properly. Like if you're buying one person, buying their shares cash, the other person is being paid on payments, you want to make sure that if you stop making payments to that person, they don't have the right to come take back the business that you bought. That's only one person. You went and cashed out the other partners. Limit your liability in how you structure a deal. Then we talk about, so this is all purchase price. You see how much fun we can have just about how we pay things? This needs to be in there. And almost always the standard term that you guys see in here is earnest money deposit. In this industry, the major thing that I'm seeing now that I've never seen before is people want you to pay them to keep their property off the market. So deposits, which are usually, we're almost always, a majority of the time, refundable. You usually get your money back when, while you're doing your due diligence. If you find out, hey, I can't get this license here to open a restaurant, or the property underneath it is contamination or something like that, I don't want to do this deal anymore. If you're within your due diligence review period, most of the time you're able to get, some of your deposit back, if not all of it. Now what we're seeing here and we're having to tailor is, oh, you don't know if the municipality opted in yet? Pay me till you figure it out. So if you have the property, or if you're the one buying the property, you're going to negotiate this very differently. You don't know how long it might take for for the municipality to opt in, and you want to be able to buy more time if you need to. You've already invested so much in this transaction. So that's a very, very important consideration, to make sure that you're putting it in here. If you're a buyer, that you have the option to extend your due diligence, because you need to make sure that you're able to acquire what you need to successfully proceed in this transaction. Contingencies. Almost always, if any of you are opening, I'm assuming you're entering into these transactions for purposes of opening a medical marijuana or a recreational marijuana license, right? So the problem is, if you put in the transaction that it's for marijuana use, and you're buying real estate companies, you want title insurance. How many of you know what title insurance is? Raise your hand. So for those who don't, title insurance is basically like car insurance. If anything happens saying that you're not the owner, or someone is coming and saying that they're the owners to the real estate, your title company is insuring you against that claim, and they're going to defend title. So this is federally underwritten. Because it's illegal under federal law, a lot of title companies will not close the transaction or insure the policy if they know the property's for that use. Hence, we go back to seller financing. There are other alternatives if you're not able to get title insurance, how to protect yourself in that regard. But again, it's more due diligence. You have to make sure the title is clean before you get it. And this guy's wife's cousin, sister's husband, who used to own the property 20 years ago, is not going to come back after you built a beautiful location and tell you, hey, I'm the owner. And then you're stuck in court trying to figure out who is the owner because you don't have title insurance. going back to the main point, depending on the type of transaction, you need to make sure that if you're only buying this business, if you're only buying this real estate, right, that you do not close, you do not have to pay the purchase price until you get the approvals that you need, which are almost always local approval to transfer the license if you already have it, and the state's approval, their blessing to say, you're good as a new owner, here's a license, put it on the wall, you're good to go. The seller, on the other hand, may not have the same, may not be okay with the same terms. They're gonna come back, if you're the seller of it, okay, there's some black and it's not it's a gray area about when you can actually transfer the liquor license. It's different, the marijuana license. That's different than any other business you usually deal with. If I own Kobo Hall, who's to come tell me I can sell it today or tomorrow, and why do I have to wait for approvals and this and that? This is mine. If you're a license holder, then you have to be very cognizant, because you're in here for the long term, that you're complying with whatever the state's requirements are to transfer. This is a new industry that's being pioneered. A year and a half ago, the state did not know how you can even transfer a license into somebody else's name. Now you go on their website, there's a checklist and there's a form of how to comply with that. As they're learning, municipalities are going to be learning, and you guys are going to be learning. But if you don't figure it out, you could jeopardize your license in the future. Another reason why it's also important to make sure you have these contingencies addressed is because how many of you have pre-qualifications? Okay, your pre-qualification, I'm assuming, is not in your own individual name. You applied under a new applicant or a new entity. If you are doing an equity sale, like we talked about before, you're selling 100% of your interest in that entity. Anything that entity owns, the buyer now owns as well. It's not per location. Whatever the company owns, you get it, you sell it all, you get it all. That may not be the best one if you have four licensed centers and you only want to sell one of them, and the only way the municipality is letting you do the transfer is if the buyers step in your shoes and operate under your name. What are you going to do there? You have to be very cognizant of these things, and that's how the deal needs to be structured, because you could lose it all potentially if you don't do it properly. Then closing, that's when everybody gets paid and gets their title to things and moves on. And I can't tell you how many purchase agreements I've seen that don't say when we're closing. It's just like, no one thinks about it. Oh, once you get your license, we're gonna close. Says who? The buyer wants more time to do their homework on other things. They're strapped on cash now. They didn't think that it would take this long. The seller is getting annoyed. Other offers have come to the table that they can't take, and they want to close. And then nobody put in the purchase agreement when you're going to close. And do you know what the law says? How long it takes for you to close if it's not written in your purchase agreement? How long do you think? 1 year? Who said that?
3 months.
1 year, 3 months. Their answer is a reasonable period of time. Like I told you, perspective is everything. What's reasonable? I was ready to close last week. These guys think reasonable is 6 more months. She says a year, you say 3 months. You guys are fighting in court right now, paying us to argue over this. So you got to make sure, this is stuff, again, I told you, when you guys read these documents, it's assumed you're sophisticated, you're choosing to enter into this business. Check to make sure you have a closing date. And are they business days or calendar days? People fight about this all the time. A very interesting case we had like a couple of months ago. The day fell on a Saturday when we were supposed to close. So is the day you close the Friday before the Saturday, or is the day that you close on the Monday, right? Because the day before or Monday. The reason why this is important is because the sellers got another offer to come buy the property for almost about $250,000 more. And if they didn't close on that day, because the other side wanted to close on Monday, they were gonna default them on the transaction, cancel the deal, say you screwed up, we get to keep all the deposits and we can go sell to these other people. That's not good business practice. If you're doing this transaction and it's a significant amount of money, you should hold money in escrow. My trick What I like to do is if it's not cashed out at closing and I represent the buyer, I try to negotiate and say, hey, you want your money at closing, what I'm giving you as your down payment, you know I have a balance with you. I'm not gonna take more out of the money that I'm giving you at closing, your down payment. I'm gonna put it in an account and let it sit there and all this stuff. I owe you $500,000 after the deal's done. I'm gonna put it in that document that I have to make payments on, and says if anything comes up and you don't pay it and it's your obligation, I'm just gonna deduct it automatically. You know how much time, money, and energy and legal fees I just saved you? You know, you just saved yourself in the headache that you can be able just to deduct that from there. But if you don't know to ask, if you just do what's standard, you know, nothing about the cannabis business is standard compared to any other business, right? It's literally legal under one side of the law and legal in another. So why are you doing your deals the same way as everything else? You shouldn't be. And this is what you need to understand going into this. These are your basic terms. So this is your cheat sheet from now till forever. Corporate structure. This is where you can get a little bit creative. It's kind of like chess. You won't know what move to make till the person makes it, but when they make that move, you should have your next 3 moves planned out. This is how you should think about your business. Okay, I opened up one location, I opened up one thing, what am I gonna do next? You need to be able to understand, especially with you guys hearing what happened earlier today about how you're being taxed and how you can structure things differently for tax incentives. This is huge. And I'm not gonna talk more about tax law and stuff like that I'm not, you know, an expert on, but what I am an expert on is ownership papers. Why do you think you have ownership interest in something? Is it because you have another document that says that you're 50% owner, 51% owner, 5% owner? Where is the paperwork that says you're the owner of it? That paperwork is so important because, like I told you, because this industry is not like any other industry, you know, if you die, not trying to be morbid, but if you die, you can't just leave your percentage in a trust to your heirs. Are they pre-qualified? Is it approved? What are you gonna do with that money? Here's why it's important. If it's an LLC, you call it an operating agreement. If it's an Inc. or a corporation, it's called a shareholder agreement. All it means is the agreement between the owners. That paper should say what everybody else in your team is gonna do if you get disabled, if you die, or if you get a divorce. Maybe you love your partner, but you hate his wife and you don't want to be partners with her, and as soon as they file for divorce and maybe she gets it in the divorce, you want to be able to cash your partner out, so you guys go fight about the money. We don't want to be her partner. All this stuff needs to be in there, and you're in it for the long run. I know you guys are putting your head down, you guys are grinding, you guys are hustling, you're trying to find the next opportunity. This is a lot of stuff here, but this is why there is no I in team. You're not supposed to be doing this alone. Everybody has their area of expertise, and you're only as good, like your fist is stronger than one finger. So like you know what I mean? You can't do much like this, but you can with this. So the stronger you make your fist, the stronger your legal team is, your accounting team is, you know, your compliance team is, the stronger you are, the more sophisticated you are in these transactions, you're just gonna be better at what you do. So these are very important. Don't think if you don't make this that the state doesn't have a fallback. They have default rules that are governed by a very long statute, and it's like a lot of pages. And guess what the whole thing basically says? Everything needs to be reasonable. You know, when's a reasonable time period? What's the reasonable purchase price of that person that passed away's shares? It doesn't do anything for you. You're gonna argue, and then some judge who knows nothing about this industry is gonna have to decide or force you guys to go settle in some little room in court. And this person that knows nothing about your business is gonna tell you what it's worth at the end of the day. You don't wanna do that. You work too hard to get to that point. Money. People always argue about this all the time. I'm gonna put in blood, sweat, and tears into this business. You're gonna put in the money that we need to get going. Does it say it in there? What if because he's putting up all the money, he's 51%, you're working and you're putting 49%, and that other person is the majority, and he decides, I'm sick and tired of putting money into the company anymore. I don't know how they're running it. I'm doing a cash call. We need another $100,000. Okay, you're gonna go to that person. I told you I don't have the money. I'm working. I haven't gotten paid in 2 years. I don't have the money to put it up. You're in default. Your shares revert to that person. They're now 100% owner. It's very common to happen. Again, know who you're going into bed with, know who you're going into an agreement with, a partnership with, but these are things that you need to consider because it should say in there. If you're not supposed to put in any money in the business, it should say that in there, no matter if your partner is with that person or somebody else or you're bringing more people. Maybe you do so well and you end up, bringing in more people that want to be part of your project and they are raising a cash call. They want you to contribute. You don't want to have to explain to them what you already explained when you got started, that you're not putting in any more money. It's very important to put that in there especially. And then who's managing it? This industry is very, very in the details. So maybe you found somebody that knows how to grow better than you, or maybe you found a company that could consult and do more than you. There are very specific terms and say if someone's controlling the company or managing the company, they have to be vetted by the state. So you can't just go enter into all these agreements and have people running your business like you would in any other industry. If you had a restaurant, you can hire the best team out of New York to come run your whole kitchen for you or anything like that. Here, you need to know that these moves, these decisions may or may not jeopardize your license, but it's a consideration that you have to make and think about before you do it. Another thing that I literally had a guy bring a contract to me last week. It was an illegal contract. Like if I would have consulted him on this contract, I probably would have been charged for like conspiring with this. It said in the agreement, like we agreed to give this much percentage to this person in this cannabis business. That's called profit sharing. You can do this in so many other areas, right? Like you and your mom are agreeing to share profit out of this business, and then you and your husband have another business here, or you and your cousin have a business here, and you're deciding to take the money out of all these locations and put it into a new one. The government doesn't really, as long as you're paying taxes, tell you how to share your profit. But in cannabis, that's a very strict requirement on who you can share your profit with and how you can do that. So you can't just enter into an agreement and say, hey, give me a percentage out of your location and I'll give you a percentage out of my business. That has to be a very important document that you sit down and have a team reviewing, because then you're conspiring potentially to do something illegal if it hasn't been approved by the state. This one is a very important consideration. If you are ever going to purchase real estate and you're going to house the business that you want there, make sure you don't purchase it unless your CPA or tax advisor tells you otherwise. Be careful putting it all under one company, because then anything the business does wrong, you can sue for the property and vice versa. So where are we at in this industry right now? It's literally survival of the fittest, honestly. From what I'm seeing right now, you may have the best model, the best business plan, but if you don't have the location, you're really not able to do anything. Then when you do find the location, prices are inflated at a rate I've never seen now. It's all really supply and demand. And so you have to adapt to survive. We just added, now there are new licenses, it's going recreational. We're now in the medical stage. Before that, it was a caregiver model. You guys, it's like the Wild West. You're deciding to do business before the people that are telling you how to do it even figured out really what's going on. And so you're constantly having to adapt to that. And you have to make sure you're always on top of it, that your team is always on top of it. And it's evolving. Right now, the biggest concern is that there's a shortage of product. And you're not able to just grow anywhere you want. You have to be in the municipality that allows that. You have to be regulated. You have to be, there's oversight and things like that. And so it's holding you back from being able to do what you want to do. You have more rules. Normally in these type of industries, when it's in a service industry, you don't have so much regulatory compliance. As small business owners, if that's what most of you are, you're having to step up your game and almost operate on a macro level like larger corporations, because you need to have regulatory compliance. They always say it doesn't matter if you didn't know what the law is, you're still liable for it. Like you're speeding, you didn't know the speed limit was, 25, you're going 45. The cop doesn't care if you didn't know, you're responsible for it. So that's something you have to take into consideration. Valuations. This is a very, very big point here, because when you want to decide how much you're selling your business or company for, or how much your asset is worth, you have to be conscious to not just overpay because it's available, right? That's what I see a lot of the times. It's like, oh, this is for sale. They're asking $20 million. Okay, but how long will it take you to pay that back, to actually start making profit? And can you even transfer that once you get it? How are you going to utilize it? These are things you have to understand when you're entering into any type of business. The more you know about something, the more successful that you're going to be about it. And it all comes down to the numbers in this industry at the end of the day. So you have to make sure whatever you're going to end up doing, you've done your homework on it. You make sure that the value of what you're paying is worth it, and that you are able to operate it. People always ask me all the time, oh, do you have any properties? Do you have any properties? And I always tell them, I can't find the gold. I'll tell you what to do with it after you find it. But the thing about it is when you're looking where to put your business, think about it just as that, as a business. Look at the demographics in the area. Try to understand, who's around you, what's around you, what are the people like, how much does it take to operate it? And that's how you make your business decision more sophisticated. When you think about it, not just, oh, I want to jump on the bandwagon, I want to get into this, I want to do everything I can to just get a piece of it. Well, you have to make sure that piece is successful. And these are the things that you have to take into consideration at the end of the day if you want a long-term goal in this industry. These are the new licenses that I'm sure you guys have already looked into that are available for recreational. And at the end of the day, as Al was talking about, it really comes down to battle of the product, right? At some point, the market's gonna be leveled out. There's gonna be more places for you to be able to have these locations. And then it really comes down to quality. If people are able to go get what they need from so many other places, what brings them to you? And that's when you can really focus on, if you have something right now, as being your passion and being what you offer in this market, where it doesn't even matter if you're an hour away. People are willing to drive to come to you because of what you have. And that's why you guys are in this industry, right? It is about the money, but at the end of the day, if you want to be in here long term, if you want to survive, you have to be consistent and you have to keep growing and evolving in your product. And that's it. Adapt to survive. Anybody have any questions? Guys, you're all experts now. Let's go do deals. Thank you, guys.